plants have thoughts? Does water have memory? Can people's subconscious minds really be influenced? Do our minds carry energy that can affect the world around us? These are some of the deepest questions in the cosmos. What about supernormal abilities like mind reading, telekinesis, simultaneous inventions on opposite sides of the world, or clairvoyance? And what is consciousness? What am I? It's the age-old question philosophers have been asking for millennia. The human body, mind, matter, the soul. In Edge of Wonder's journey to dive into the truth, this is a new beginning in our exploration of the human body, life, and the universe. When we put our heads together, what do you think we'll find? Join Edge of Wonder for the mind-blowing conclusion that will leave you with entirely new understandings about the power of the mind and even the cosmos itself. The Power of the Mind, Part 2, Mysteries Unlocked.
Well, everyone, we hope you liked our last episode of The Power of the Mind. And if your mind wasn't blown in our last episode, then prepare for a mental meltdown.
Okay, Ben, that might be going to extremes,
Maybe.
But one thing is for sure. By the time you finish this episode, you will be looking at all plants and trees differently. Welcome to the Edge of Wonder, where the strange keeps getting stranger.
We're your hosts. I'm Ben.
And I'm Rob. In our last episode, we went over some pretty supernormal facts on our amazing brain and just how powerful the brain really is. We also went over stories of how we limit ourselves when we have negative thoughts.
And how we can achieve the unthinkable when we believe in ourselves and are connected to the divine. In this episode, we'll get more into experiments with the human mind, how the things without a brain seem to have a mind, and how many things around us seem to be alive.
Also, we'll get into the dark aspect of mind control and how some know how to access and even control the subconscious mind.
We wanted to jump in right away with one of the most fascinating aspects of this episode. Do plants have a mind? And believe it or not, there is even evidence to support that they not only can think, but they can read minds.
First, let's start out with a recent TED Talk with neuroscientist Greg Gage, who demonstrated that plants can communicate with each other. He did this by hooking up an EKG to a mimosa plant, which closes its leaves when touched, and connecting it to a Venus flytrap.
When he touched the Venus flytrap, the plant sent electrical signals to the mimosa plant, letting it know it was touched, which also made a spike in the EKG. The result was that as soon as the Venus flytrap plant was touched, the mimosa plant closed all of its leaves at the same time. But this is just the beginning of where we're about ready to take you.
In the 70s, a new show came out called In Search Of, hosted by Leonard Nimoy, aka Mr. Spock. The show dived into everything: aliens, Bigfoot, Atlantis, the Bermuda Triangle, the paranormal, strange disappearances such as Michael Rockefeller's, and everything else, really.
Yeah, basically everything we kind of cover on Edge of Wonder. But the thing is, we didn't even know about the show till we started researching this topic. The pilot episode was called Other Voices, which was all about plants.
In the episode, they conducted an experiment with music and plants. They had one group of plants listening to classical music and another listening to rock music at the same volume. What they found was that the plants listening to classical music were all slowly bending towards the speakers.
But the plants listening to rock music were slowly bending away from the speakers as if they were trying to get away, and they slowly started to die off. Now, I know some of you out there might find this a little unsettling, considering you probably like rock music.
Or you might be like, I like AC/DC, what do you mean?
Yeah, but this...
You're dying from it.
Well,
Just kidding.
well, this is just the experiment. Yeah, that's hard to say. Well,
Anyway, Leonard Nimoy explained that sound waves themselves are wavelengths of energy, and energy can take on many different forms. So from this aspect, it makes sense, right? So even without ears or even brains, plants seem to have a sixth sense that even we humans as a whole haven't been able to completely tap into.
But what if we told you that plants can not only communicate with each other, but can even read minds? Now, before you guys all flip out and start asking if we've truly lost our minds here, let's get into the entire backstory of this.
And we can already tell you that we have.
Well, enter CIA lie detector specialist Cleve Baxter.
What a name.
Who was about as far as you can get from a botanist.
Baxter was deeply involved with scientific research in the polygraph community. He even developed the Baxter zone comparison test in the late 1950s, which the military still uses to this day. But one day he just had an idea. What would happen if I connected a lie detector to a plant? He wrote and documented all of this in his book, Primary Perception.
Here's Cleve explaining in his own words what happened and how this random test changed his whole life.
This particular morning, I had been working all night in the laboratory and had decided to water a plant in the lab, very similar to the plant here, Dracaena cane plant. My thought was that as the moisture arrived to the leaf of the plant, the plant should be a better conductor, and I should get a reading on the chart. Well, strangely enough, I didn't get this at all, and in fact, it did just the opposite. Instead of the tracing edging upward as it should have on the chart, it went into sort of a wild excitation, very similar to the first part of a human taking a polygraph test. But then it occurred to me, just about 14 minutes along, what would be the real optimum threat to the well-being of a plant. In fact, the imagery of fire entered my mind, and I not only thought, but I fully intended to burn the very leaf that was being tested with a match. Now, I had no matches in the room at the time, and I don't smoke, and I had to go next door to my secretary's area to get a match. But the interesting thing is that right at the split second that imagery of fire entered my mind, the tracing reflecting the changes in the plant just went right off the top of the page. And the only thing that occurred at that time, no lighting of a match, nothing else, merely the imagery of fire. And I must say that as of 14 minutes along in that initial observation on the morning of February 2nd, 1966, my life just hasn't been the same.
So did you guys get that? The thought of burning the leaves without even saying it or taking action made the plant react in a state of fear. This is when Cleve started to conduct a wide variety of tests on plants.
At this point, Cleve decided to go beyond the boundaries of the entire scientific community. He worked nights so there would be fewer people around to influence the plants. One of the first tests he made was with brine shrimp.
He randomly selected a time when a group of small shrimp in a cup would automatically fall to their deaths in boiling water. The purpose was to see if a plant in a completely different room would react when they all died.
He placed the electrodes on the plant, set up a video camera to record everything, and left his lab. In his own words, Cleve had to leave the lab in order for his own consciousness to not affect the results. That makes sense.
Yeah. Now back in the lab, the polygraph was reading normal readings from the plant. Then, as you can see here from the clip, as soon as the shrimp fell into the boiling water, I guess you could say EKG readings from the plant went off the chart, meaning that the plant was reacting when the shrimp all died.
Cleve said that he never thought much of a greater consciousness overall, and all of this changed his entire perspective on the meaning of life. Here's what Cleve said in his own words after looking at the results from the test.
A few brine shrimp die and a plant feels their death. I think it's the smallness of the event that makes it so significant. It means that even on the lower levels of life, there's a profound consciousness or an awareness that binds all things together.
Cleve started to perform all kinds of experiments. They were also documented in a different book called The Secret Life of Plants. In one experiment, he asked one of his friends who was assisting him to stomp on a plant while it was in the same room with another plant.
Cleve then hooked the surviving plant to the lie detector and gathered 4 of his other students. He asked them to step into the room one at a time and watch the plant's reaction. No traces of reaction were drawn for the first 4. But when he asked the friend who destroyed the other plant to walk into the room, right away the observer plant sent out a wave of electricity which in essence identified the murderer.
Cleve wasn't the only one conducting experiments on plants. Russian scientists also started to do research in this field. In one study, they also hooked up a lie detector to a plant and then sliced lettuce in front of it.
They found that the plant was reacting to the lettuce being sliced as if it was scared or could feel its pain. Then they also recreated Cleve's experiment where someone destroyed a plant in front of another and then had different technicians enter the room one at a time.
The plant also created a spike on the machine when the person who destroyed the plant entered the room. Many others have tested these experiments, with some being able to recreate them with success and some not being able to replicate all of them.
However, nearly everyone from the scientific establishment condemns Cleve Baxter's experiments and believes that they were conducted in error without even testing their validity. Only a small number of scientists came forward to support him, and it was mostly in secret. Problematica of a higher order.
There we go again.
Yeah.
All right. So in 2019, we did an episode on water memory, but sadly, due to the pressure of censorship, we had to take that one specifically down for a while. It was actually, personally, one of my favorite episodes that we have made. But without getting into the deep end of it, we can talk about the shallow end of it.
All right, you are killing me with these water puns, bro. So if you haven't heard of it, this is a story about a scientist named Jacques Benveniste. He was head of INSERM's Unit 200 in the 80s.
His work was based on the homeopathic medicine concept that dilution increases potency, which made homeopathic medicine more mainstream. Basically, the concept is when you dilute medicine, it actually has more of an effect on the body because it activates your own immune system while bringing fewer side effects.
Benveniste wasn't really interested in the aspect of water having memory at all. It wasn't until he discovered this by accident in his experiments. They looked at antiserums or blood serums with antibodies to test people's blood for allergies.
Homeopathic medicine uses water to dilute substances, followed by vigorous shaking of the vials. This is believed to energize the water. So he used 20 vials of water, and each one was diluted by a factor of 10. So the second dilution was 100 times weaker than the original vial. And by the 20th time it was diluted, it would almost be like putting a drop in the ocean. There was nothing left of the original serum.
Benveniste then asked for the vials that were the most diluted to be added to blood samples. He thought for sure nothing would happen since it contained nothing of the original antiserum.
So if someone was allergic to the serum, the white blood cells, or specifically basophils, would cause them to die or degranulate on contact with an allergen-releasing histamine, which is involved in inflammatory response. But in this case, nothing should happen.
However, they found that the amount of cells that were degranulated by the dilution was just the same as in the full-strength allergen. That meant the cells reacted the same to basically just water that had been in contact with the tiniest bit of medicine.
Benveniste first thought it was just an error, so they tested again and got the same results. After the next test showed the same results, Benveniste said he was completely flabbergasted. He had no explanation for how this happened.
So after 2 to 3 years of devoting all of his time to getting to the bottom of what the heck was going on and how this could happen, he said that there was no possibility that any molecule could have possibly survived. Here is a clip of him explaining it.
So there was no possibility that any molecule could survive in this solution. Therefore, we had to envision the fact that everything was going on as if water was capable of memorizing the molecule it had seen at the beginning of the dilution. And billions and billions and billions of dilution after, it still knew with some process that it had seen that molecule. And hence was coined the expression, the memory of water.
This discovery of the memory of water made Benveniste feel like he might have stumbled upon one of the greatest scientific discoveries of the 20th century. The media in France were eating this up, but the scientific community remained silent on the matter.
They even refused to publish his work, and when they did, they made a statement at the end of his journal basically saying that it was very unlikely his findings were real because otherwise it would rewrite science as we know it. Isn't that science?
Yeah, really.
Hello.
So in a nutshell, imagine you could be healed of an illness with an extremely watered down and diluted medicine and that your body then takes over and heals itself without needing to take strong medicines or even possible, taking a shot. So is this possible? How is this possible?
Well, Luc Montagnier, who was the Nobel Prize winner in medicine and discoverer of the HIV virus, calls Benveniste the Galileo of this century. He continued on with his work and even found more insane results than Benveniste did.
The entire scientific community has shunned Montagnier and think he has lost his mind. Currently is working with quantum field theory and physics to suggest that hydrogen bonding is induced by a time-dependent radiative long-range electromagnetic field.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah, whatever that means. I'm not really sure.
I just believe him now, whatever that is.
Right.
So what does all of this mean? Well, it means that water doesn't necessarily have a mind, but that as water flows and travels, it seems to pick up and store information from all the places that the water has traveled or that it had been through.
This brings an even deeper understanding of human consciousness because it shows that we are all connected, or that the water is connecting us even more to each other. Imagine sending a message to someone else through water. Sounds insane, but Montagnier's team has been working on this.
Well, you guys, since this is an episode on the power of the mind and not on plants or water, we wanted to move on to something different. Let's talk more about experiments on the human mind. Throughout the years, there have been many of these testing the limits of human consciousness.
We talked about a few in our last episode, but we wanted to go even further with this. We don't want to really get into the MK Ultra experiments since we have covered this a lot and went over this in detail in our Old World Order episode on false flags.
Instead, we'll go over experiments that you probably don't know of, such as the 1971 Stanford prison experiment. In this experiment, they wanted to examine the psychological effects of authority and powerlessness in a prison environment. Sounds healthy.
So 24 applicants were selected out of 70 who were said to be physically and mentally healthy, and they were actually paid $15 a day. They were then randomly divided into prison guards and actual prisoners.
All of the guards received mirrored sunglasses and wooden batons so they would make eye contact with the prisoners. But the interesting thing is that they brought in real police to actually arrest these prisoners. Then they blindfolded them and gave them each a number.
The basement of one of the campus buildings became a makeshift prison where the criminals were being held. They wanted them to truly have an atmosphere of oppression, so they put all of the prisoners in a uniform and put a chain padlock around one ankle. And then they stripped them of any individuality.
Guards were given 8-hour shifts and were told to treat the prisoners the same as if they were in a real prison, basically. Already by the second day, the prisoners staged a riot, which in turn forced the guards to issue more rules.
Soon, most of the prison guards became tyrannical and downright mean. They forced the prisoners to use buckets instead of the toilets. Some even made the prisoners strip naked and sleep on the floor. One even went on a hunger strike, which landed him in a solitary confinement.
I mean, wait, what? This just sounds like China.
Yeah.
Well, some of the prisoners became so depressed through this that they let them go. But the craziest part was that this only lasted 6 days. It was supposed to go on for 2 weeks, but the girlfriend of Philip Zimbardo, who organized the study, forced it to shut down after realizing what a disaster it was turning out to be.
As big as a failure as it was, the study did show that most of the personality traits and behavior that came about in the guards were brought about by the situation rather than individual personalities.
It was analyzed by a mental health expert who found how disturbing it is that people will act like this, but compared it to the Holocaust. For example, when someone's identity is stripped away and replaced with a number, it becomes easier to dehumanize them at that point. China. They simply become a number and then are treated as an animal.
But after the study, all tests from that point on needed to be approved by the school. And they developed ethic codes and guidelines for any future psychological study that would be conducted. The sad part is that we found a lot of studies seem to be funded by some of the elite people or even the government.
What a surprise.
Yeah, seriously.
The study was funded by a U.S. government grant from the U.S. Office of Naval Research. There have been so many psychological studies that it's impossible to list them all, but we did want to talk about the Asch conformity experiment.
This experiment is important because honestly, the media companies use this all the time. The purpose was to see if a person would conform when faced with social pressure from a group majority, even when the facts are as obvious as it can be.
Oh, I mean, what are you talking about, Ben? The media doesn't do that at all. I mean, when CNN says something is a peaceful protest, even though buildings are being burned in the background, reporters are running away, and people are destroying homes, then it must be peaceful, right?
Right. And if they say something is safe, then it must be safe too, even though people died from it. But don't worry, it's still safe. I mean, we could do a whole episode on things the media has tried to convince us on, honestly, but...
Right, and that's why understanding these experiments are so important. So going back to this one, what happened is that 50 male students were asked to participate in a so-called vision test. Out of the 50, only one of them did not know the real purpose of the test.
Everyone was shown this target line, and on the other side were 3 lines of different sizes. One of the lines matched the target line, and they were asked to say which ones were the same size. When looking at it, it is very obvious that the answer was the letter C.
Everyone went around the room to state out loud what they believed was the answer. However, all of the first students said it was A and not C. The real participant being tested was at the end of the row, and the study was really to see what he would say.
Right, would he go against facts and the obvious correct answer just to conform to the group? The results were rather shocking. Out of 18 trials, 12 people gave the wrong answer. So about 75% conformed at least once, while 25% never conformed to the group.
However, when there was no pressure to conform, fewer than 1% of the participants gave the wrong answer. That is actually pretty heartening to hear. A few said that they knew the group was wrong, but were worried about how others would look at them. So they wanted to fit in and also believe that maybe the group knew something that he didn't.
It is interesting that they chose all men. Recently, there was a viral video going around of people waiting in an optometrist's office. The main participant had no idea that she was being tested, but randomly in the video, people would all stand up after hearing a tone and then sit down again, confusing the heck out of her.
After the third beep, the woman conformed to the group and stood up without asking why they were standing or even understanding why she should stand. Slowly, people were called away and taken back to offices. However, she still stood up every time till she was completely alone.
Then she is sitting alone and the beep goes off. What do you think she does? What would you do? Well, even though no one was there watching her or even understanding why everyone is even standing up to begin with, she stands up alone in the room when the beep goes off. I mean, but that isn't the craziest part.
Soon, new people came in who had no idea what was going on. The first guy had a look like, man, this girl is weird, and then even asked her why she was standing. She said she had no idea, but everyone else was doing it. Soon this guy begins to stand too.
The sad part was that no matter who walked into the room, they all started to stand, even though they had no idea why anyone was doing it.
Mainstream media's lasting effects.
Yes. This is what's called herd behavior, and it is used all of the time.
Sadly, this is pretty much the 5 monkey experiment getting played out with humans. If you haven't heard it before, 5 monkeys were in a room and they had a ladder with bananas on the top. Whenever a monkey climbed the ladder, the scientists would spray the other monkeys with water.
If any monkey at that point tried to climb the ladder, the other monkeys would beat up that monkey so they wouldn't get sprayed with water.
The scientists slowly replaced the monkeys one by one, and when a new one came in, the other monkeys would beat up that monkey who tried to climb the ladder.
Eventually, all 5 monkeys were replaced, and even though none of the monkeys got sprayed with water, they would still beat any monkey that tried to climb the ladder, even though they had no idea why they were doing that. So in essence, what we are seeing is the 5 monkey experiment with humans, except, no one is beating each other up or being sprayed with water.
So you have to ask yourself, are you a monkey or a human that thinks?
Yeah.
And no one's fighting over the banana. I mean, it would be kind of shocking to see how people would perform instead of monkeys in that test, except no one would care if it was just over a banana. They would need to use something a little bit more,
Yeah, like maybe placing $1,000 in cash or something on top of the ladder and see what happens.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, but no. Anyway, we're just joking. But honestly, we don't want to see it because we already see it every day on the news and it's getting very tiring, actually.
Right, and people are rejecting the mainstream narrative more and more. We are not buying their communist agenda and are actually pushing back and waking up. Sadly, there are a lot more negative studies in the human mind rather than positive ones.
Yeah, but there are some positive ones that exist. For example, National Geographic had a woman try to sink 10 shots with a basketball. She missed all 10, so they decided to blindfold her and have her try again with 2 more shots.
There was a small crowd watching, and even though she missed the 2 blindfolded shots, everyone cheered as if she made both of them. With her confidence now boosted, the host had her shoot 10 more shots. This time, she made 4 out of the 10 shots, and with a smile the whole time. So this was at least a positive experiment.
Well, we have talked about the individual mind, but what about the overall collective mind of human beings together? Are our minds truly connected? Let's get into some cool stuff with the 100 monkey effect.
Have you ever had an idea for a name of something, a product or a company, and then not too long later you see a new product or company come out with the exact same thing that you thought of? That happens to me all the time.
This is known as multiple discovery or simultaneous invention. It is when great scientific discoveries are made by an inventor or a scientist and simultaneously in some other part of the world, the same discovery is made without knowing anything about the other person.
This is also known as the 100th monkey effect, which was a study in the 50s on the behavioral patterns of monkeys. The only thing is today, it hasn't completely been confirmed, but there are plenty of details to show it really seemed to be real.
The story is that on the Japanese island of Koshima, scientists were giving sweet potatoes to macaque monkeys, but the potatoes were covered in sand. An 18-month-old female monkey named Emo found that by washing the potatoes in water, it would get the sand off.
It wasn't overnight, but after a few years, the younger monkeys all learned to wash the potatoes, and soon they were all washing their potatoes. But according to Ken Key Jr.'s books, the 100th monkey, only the younger monkeys were doing this.
So our good friend Justin Deschamps, who has his Into the Storm series on our Edge of Wonder platform and also Stillness in the Storm website, pointed out that the older monkeys were more set in their ways and almost resisted the sudden change of the behavioral pattern of the younger monkeys.
But the real effect here was that the monkeys on a nearby island who couldn't see the first island at all also began to wash their potatoes. As Justin pointed out, there is a kind of universal information transmission, meaning that our minds or consciousness send out waveforms, and it's quite possible that we're experiencing this on a subconscious level.
We know our mind carries energy, and many people believe our thoughts do as well. For example, people who meditate know this very well. And if someone is upset and you remain calm and serene, that person will naturally calm down too. Your energy can calm them down.
Many people believe that the human race is all connected, but when we're too focused on our own wants, have too many negative thoughts, or rely too much on science, we become disconnected.
But what if we were doing something that would be helpful or benefit mankind? Also, what if our thoughts are different or even transcend space and time and other dimensions? Now, I know this might sound a little bit out there, but divine beings could use this as a way to bring ideas to people living halfway around the world.
An example of this would be the phonograph, which was created by both Thomas Edison in the US and Scott D. Martinville in France nearly at the exact same time. But the really insane one is actually Einstein's theory of relativity, which was thought of nearly at the same time by a French physicist named Henri Poincaré.
Yeah, which you don't hear about at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Either of those guys. You know, the second one.
Yeah, and even the telephone was being invented simultaneously by a woman named Elisha Gray, and of course, the one we all know from Alexander Graham Bell.
And the Higgs boson, aka the God particle, was actually developed into a full relativistic model by 3 groups of physicists simultaneously, but I guess only one of them got it named after them.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sure many people out there have experienced this many times where someone you haven't thought of in a while all of a sudden pops into your mind, and you wonder how that person is doing.
Then out of the blue, you either run into them, they send you a message, or call you on the phone.
This actually happens to me all the time, although it never happens when I want it to happen or if I want to hear from somebody, you know? It's just like randomly, like, wonder what this person's doing, and then they get a hold of me. But there are also times when you just know someone needs help or is going through something, as if you all of a sudden think, hey, I need to call this person. Something is wrong.
This happens a lot when looking for a certain product too. It almost seems as if everyone at the same time all wants the same product, and then it becomes impossible to find. like toilet paper. Can't imagine why anyone would want that. Of course, this can be easily manipulated by having a celebrity promote something, and then everyone seems to want it, of course.
Yeah. Now, whether or not the 100th Monkey story was real, the 100thmonkey.org site said it the best. Quote, "The point is that we need more people at the leading edge of thought and the frontier of change, especially at this time. If enough people leave the old fear-based paradigm, then together our thoughts and powers of manifestation could increase exponentially. What if people just started questioning beliefs instilled in them like programs instead of sleepwalking through life? What if they were empowered with the heart-centered truth of their potential?"
And this brings up a whole other point. What if we truly had the ability, or our minds were completely open to where we were able to access every aspect of our brain? Some say we only use 10% of our brain, but today most scientists say that's a myth because of science.
Yeah. But what about supernormal abilities? There are many stories of martial artists in China who can do amazing feats and even defy the laws of physics. And in history, there are many monks both from Christian and Buddhist beliefs.
Right, such as Saint Joseph of Cupertino. His story says that while he was reading the Bible or at, church and mass, he would get so overcome by the emotion over the divine that he would literally just kind of rise up into the air. There were actually over 150 eyewitness accounts seeing him levitate and flying around in the air. That's a lot of people.
That is, yeah. However, the crazy part was that he was viewed as a nuisance because to the other priests and monks, he would come in and start floating in the air, disrupting the mass. The people started to follow him, but eventually he was kicked out of the church.
But he wasn't kicked out because of his disruption. He was really kicked out because they were extremely jealous of him. He was so pious that he would only fill his mind with the words of God and contributed everything he had to God.
Most likely the priests in the church were not as pure and devoted as he was, so they could not reach the same level as altruistic understanding. The interesting thing is that this also happened in ancient China with a monk named Jigong.
Jigong, or Ji the Crazy Monk as he was sometimes called, was known to have supernormal abilities. Just like Saint Joseph, he was kicked out of Lingyin Temple. Later, he met up with more monks who wanted to build a new temple, but the only wood around wasn't very good, and the best wood was, about nearly 900 miles away.
But this didn't stop Jigong. It is said that he would use his superpowers to bring the logs out from a well from over 900 miles away to build the temple in Hangzhou. This temple is the Zhangxi Temple, which still has the famous well where Jigong brought the logs over from 900 miles away.
The story goes that as he was bringing them over, the other monks told him that they'd had enough, and the last log remained suspended in midair, with part of it coming out of the well. There's another story too, where Jigong saw with the ability of clairvoyance, or with his mind's eye or third eye, that a landslide was about to destroy a village.
He ran over to alert everyone of the coming disaster. However, because he seemed a bit crazy and a little odd, no one believed him and instead laughed at him. Desperate, he tried a different tactic. A wedding was about to take place and he decided to kidnap the bride and ran off with her.
Now, enraged with anger, the entire village went after him, and no sooner had they left to go after him than rocks came tumbling down from the mountain, destroying their village. But since nearly everyone left to chase after him, no one really got hurt.
Afterwards, he released the bride and told the people that he had to do it this way since they would not heed his words. The villagers thanked him afterwards and began to assess the damage.
When looking at supernormal abilities from the past or even the present, some don't believe in them. A select few people have them, and some people will stop at nothing to try to acquire them.
But what if we all truly have the potential to have these abilities? From our understanding, it is all about human morality. I mean, in the past, everyone believed in God. Most wars or conflicts were fought over which God people believed in.
Today it isn't like that, and many people don't believe in the divine or God. So you can imagine if someone who had low morals were to get some kind of superpower. They would turn into a supervillain right away.
Yeah, most people don't think about how they would want to help others with these powers and how they can uplift society as a whole or wish to understand the deeper meaning of the universe. Instead, most people's first thought is going to Vegas and winning the lottery or showing off as if there was something so great in the world.
From our understanding, this is also why head monks and priests don't have these abilities either. I mean, just look at the Catholic Church and see how many scandals have broken out over child sexual abuse.
And as we all know, so many politicians are corrupt as well. We won't get into any names, of course. Could any of these people develop these abilities? Of course, some of them possibly secretly do, but I mean, those aren't coming from good, pure, divine sources. Most of those looking for superpowers with evil in mind are from the satanic side of society, but that is a whole different topic.
Totally.
Yeah.
We believe that the purpose of mind abilities is actually not to pursue these things, but to live life in a noble and upright manner. And as we do, we'll naturally come to understand more and more about life, the universe, and even our own human bodies.
Imagine what discoveries human beings would make if we all went out of the boundaries of science and had an open thought that anything is possible. What if we worked together to find solutions to better the planet and for humankind? We would evolve into a completely different way of living and being.
Instead of fighting for power or fame, money, or control, humans would see changes in our society overnight. We would reach into new heights in understanding of spiritual awakening, have technology that could travel beyond our physical reality, and have a deeper appreciation of our fellow man.
We would also have new understandings of the universe and become better as people and as society. No doubt our minds would open up more and we would be able to access parts of our thinking and our minds that we'd never conceived before. We would also be more connected to each other and especially to the divine.
Unfortunately, there is the ultimate battle of good and evil taking place at this very moment, trying to stop us from understanding our true potential. But even though the battle may seem like God and the forces of good are losing, God is always in control. And through this process, people are waking up and turning more to the divine.
So we just want to say that even though things will change in our world, always stay positive and never give up hope. We all have so many divine heavenly beings watching over us. Even if you believe it or not, this is what we believe. And we have the power of our minds, our families, and our friends. We just need to always keep our own faith.
Thank you all for being a part of this journey through what Ben and I have created through Edge of Wonder. We're all facing many challenges, but no matter what happens or what format we use, we will continue to bring the truth to the whole world.
Yes, so thank you guys so much. Where there's an ending, there is always a new beginning. Our journey is just getting started, and I know we are all looking forward to what the future holds for each and every one of us.
We love you guys, and with that, we're sending you out
on the edge of where an old journey ends and a new one will begin.
That's right. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying this episode.
If you want to watch the rest and get access to our full catalog of content with hundreds of videos that will keep you entertained for hours and hours, subscribe to rise.tv.
Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss a single new drop.
Yeah, and we'll see you out on the edge.